market now for selling small, medium companies is much different than it was, even 10 years ago. So there was a pretty specific route to selling. So I thought I had to match that process.
Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome. We got Mr. AJ Lawrence in the house. Just, you didn't know this, but my grandfather was named Austin. So up until 19 years old, I went by AJ. Until about 20, I met my ex-wife, and she goes, Austin just sounds more regal. So I switched to Austin. So my friends, meaning my friends from childhood, still call me AJ. So see, we're connected in many more ways than just that. But
dude, it was meant to be.
So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to do an episode. I was reading a book one time. I remember where I was in Utah, and it was talking about exiting your business. And it was saying that nobody dies selling their business. They die after they sell their business. It's the climb down that drives them crazy, right? Because this thing they birthed, this thing that they've lived in, they've thought about over and over again. I think Tom Bellew said, this big check showed up on my bank account, but that didn't mean my brain stopped, right? And so you sell your business, and so we're going to unpack, give us this, meaning how long did you start your business and all that stuff before we get into the exiting part?
Well, I've started many businesses, but I've sold 3 over the years. The last one I sold back in 2014 was a digital marketing agency. And we had grown to about 8 million, but we started in 2006, grown it over the years. And then back in, I want to say late 2012, I lost my whale. So kind of taking a step back, I had been living in New York. I had been in and out between starting my own and working at different large agencies in the New York ad scene, very digital, doing all this stuff. So I was very focused on this sort of Madison Avenue approach, the digital Mad Men style. Matter of fact, in my last company, I even had a bar built into the thing. Yes, it was very, very New York. I used to laugh. We used to get newspapers would come every time the new season of Mad Men would come out. Be like, look, ad agencies are still drinking. It's like, great. This is what I'm known for.
Yeah. So hold on, because I laugh because one of my best friends in the entire world, I've known him for 20 years. He runs one of the divisions of UT Endowment. He worked for Goldman Sachs before that in New York. Yeah. And I said, dude, I asked him one day, I said, there's no damn way that it's really like Wolf of Wall Street. And he said, Austin, I'm really sorry to tell you, it's very similar to this.
I mean, things have evolved. I knew people in finance, but just even in talking ad agencies, there were so much in watching that when they would talk about sort of the client relationship stuff, that still goes on. Now, I never did see the whole idea of, and I know we can, if I say this incorrectly, you'll get an explicit thing, but there was an episode where Pete was talking about, they were trying to do the turkey. I don't know how much you've watched the Mad, where they did sort of discover PR, where they were doing the turkey fight battles between the women about how great this turkey brand was. And they were like, how do we expense the turkeys? He's like, I don't know. I know there's a line for BJs, expensing BJs, but there's not a line to expense turkeys. And I was like, when I saw that episode, I was like, oh my God, I had a boss who used to talk about the days where oh yeah, we had a line item, in our expense accounts. Yeah. I was like, what? Because I said, I had been in London a client was asking for something. And I was like, Yeah, and I was
Yeah.
27. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, and I kind of like
I think a
lost a
lot of
client.
times, it's funny, right? I think a lot of times, and I feel this way in small business too. I think there's a world that we think of, right? And I'll
Yeah.
use a different line. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about, fraud and theft, right?
Oh, yeah.
You think it's so far off, right? But I feel like when you buy a business, it's similar to the president, and they hand you a book, and it's like, okay, here's all the real things
Yeah.
and you're like, oh wait, this world really exists. Like, this is crazy.
I mean, the stuff that goes through, and I will get back to just like
Mm-hmm.
selling and sort of what
Mm-hmm.
happened, but like, the employee, like, just in theft and stuff. Like I had an employee once, office manager, and didn't really think about it, but like I gave her a budget for snacks for the office. And I didn't know what Kirkland Brands was at the time. I mean, so like she would say, "Oh yeah, I went to the local, we had this fancy place right around the corner from our office. Oh, I went there and I bought $100 worth of stuff." And she was buying like super cheap Kirkland stuff. And then pocketing the difference. Yeah, and it was like, yeah, I didn't know. And in of itself, that wasn't bad, but it was like, oh, that was the beginning, because eventually she slept with our bookkeeper to convince him to, you know, increase her bonus and do all sorts of stuff. And it was just like, yeah, and she left it on an unlocked computer one day, just like she walked out and someone went to see something. It was like, HA, look at this conversation.
Yeah.
But like, that stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the weirdest thing when you see that, as a business owner, when you see fraud or you see someone trying to steal or just lying or whatever, you're like, wait, I'm a good person. Why is this happening?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Guys, let me take a minute to tell you about my buddies over at Lead Hub, Ben and Aaron, the best humans I know. Not only are they amazing at marketing for trade companies, but Ben started his HVAC company in his garage, sold it for multi-million-dollar. So when this guy talks, I listen. When we took over Dietz Mechanical, we had 22 reviews in 22 years. In 7 short months, we went from 22 reviews to 107. We went from a 4.2 to a 4.7. We tripled our Facebook presence and we tripled our calls. If you're an HVAC, plumbing, electric, landscaping company, and you're looking for a no BS approach to marketing, you're looking for people who have done it before, you got to go to leadhub.net.
Yeah.
I think here's an important note, because I caught myself, right, the company we took over. It's important that you don't take on the responsibility of what somebody else has done to feel like you've done it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I came out of that fog after about 12 months, and somebody had to remind me, like, hey, you didn't do these things. I know you're fixing them, but you didn't do them. Stop behaving like you did. You're here to fix the problem. And that's just me being empathetic, but that's hard for people.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you get into all these discussions and like on my podcast, because I talk a lot about the mistakes I made in exiting my business. And so I will get to this, and talking, when we have people in. But I think, you do see like that tech bro approach of like, I'm the boss, do what I say type of thing. And then you also have these sort of like servant leaders approach, bottom up, employee first approach. And it's an interesting thing because when you get into it, how you act as, the boss, it's easy to say these things, but the day-to-day practice, and this is kind of why I really have been enjoying your podcast, this podcast, now that we're on it. Sorry, I'm so used to this Riverside. And I'm like, wait, no, this is yours, not mine. Is this day in, day out, incremental, directional approach? Because that's something I had a really great business coach who was like, look, the only thing that matters is incremental progress, directionally correct. It's like, just if you're doing a little better and a little better and you're going the right way, guess what? You've succeeded more than pretty much everyone else out there.
Because
It's frustrating.
it's such a weird thing, right? My business partner says it perfectly. Business is nothing more than war with rubber bullets. You know, and 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 the problem is with the way that it works in a project-based company or a marketing company or an HVAC company, is that you could be doing great, but you could have a hiccup of 2 to 3 weeks of payments, and you could go from, well, we've got 1 million coming in to I need 100 now, and it's going to be in 1 million's going to be in 3 days, but in those 2 days I might die if I don't figure something out. Like the roller coaster, right? Of we're doing great. Oh wow, we have a rough patch. Oh wow, 2 days later we're rich again. Is just a wild ride.
It's in the company I sold back in 14. So I would want to say early 2012, I had a quarter where I was the most revenue and most profits up until that point. But also where I had to go basically steal from my retirement fund and just wipe it out completely because I had a large client that, you know, biggest check we ever got, most amount of work, millions of dollars, multiple $1 million in a single month. And they were like, oh, you know what? Just on the fly, they went from prepaying us to like, oh, we're going to 90 days. And like, right. And it was sort of like, yeah. And of course, like I had so little in the
Mm-hmm.
tank.
Mm-hmm.
Big lesson for, I really love talking to all these, fractional CFOs because I love seeing all the things like do all these things. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. This is the stuff I
Yeah,
should have been doing.
yeah,
It's really
totally.
cool after the fact to see how, before that, I was like, yeah, whatever. Um, because yeah, that, oh, you just get hit. But yeah, it's
I
also how you
I th-
survive.
well, I think that the thing that I've learned the most, and this is what we laugh at on a regular basis, I think you can have a framework in business, and you can have a plan, but
Mm-hmm.
that plan can be destroyed within
Mike
2 days.
Tyson. Mike
Yeah.
Tyson.
Well, perfect example is, we've got a high end project manager who decides to drink too much and is running a $2 million project, and we have to fire him. And now we're 3 weeks behind. They're threatening to fire us. So we had to pull everybody off other jobs. So we literally lost almost 5 weeks to catch back up, right? And now we're caught
Yeah.
back up. But we didn't expect that to happen. This was a guy planned to work for me for years. And so that's why I think that plans in the business world are just a joke. And that's
Yeah.
why I'll be frank, if I'm being honest, I never have an appetite to be a public company. I don't know how they
Well,
report.
it's funny. I'm on the board of one, and it is kind of silly because I love the company. Unfolio is
Mm-hmm.
a great company, all this, but seeing all the work that has to go into keeping it public, and also running the business on top, it's like this extra different layer, like inadvertent things that kind of cause you to make choices. Let's just, going back to my exit, the whole reason I went down the path of exit and sort of got lucky in hindsight was I had a large client that was public, but one of those sort of like not the bulletin board, not over the counter, but like whatever the Nasdaq Mini used to be called, whatever, Um, and they were like, oh, they saw some competitor bought a marketing firm and got a pop. So monkey see, monkey do. So they started like, hey, let's acquire you, this and this, and we'll all be rich. And it was like, even my mind around that, it was like, that's not very much of a strategy. And you're going to pay me all in equity because I had that once in my first company, and then the company went bankrupt like 8 months after, my very first company I sold for stock when I was 24, all equity, and got nothing out of it. Great 3 years of working for about $4,000 was fun. But so that at least got me talking about the thing. I brought in a small investment bank that specializes in this, and we started talking. It was like, well, that's kind of a crappy offer, but you're right below the point where these holding companies will start looking. So I started having conversations just to see and getting tracked and doing all this work to kind of focus on this and growing the way I was told you needed to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain degree, what the large holding companies want isn't exactly the best structured business because they get more leverage if you're over leveraged and they're coming in, but I didn't know that. But it got me down this route that we started looking to buy. So I lost my whale, my large client that was like 50% of the business in late 2012. That same one that held me, hostage, not hostage, but like, prepay to 90 days. So here, go figure out how you're going to, fund a couple of $1 million of our business for, here. So in that process, though, we started having so many conversations. I restructured the business, got rid of all my super expensive smart people because I couldn't afford them without my whale. And we got very lean and mean, and we started growing again, but we were not on that lovely rocket ship trajectory anymore. But I was able to sell because, one, I had at least had so many conversations that some of the secondary and tertiary people who I had kind of ignored earlier were still interested. And those talks, and I was burnt. So someone came in that was a lot less than I could have had just a few years, 2 years earlier.
Sure.
But they were going to give me cash and they were going to take my mental, you had kind of said earlier, this way of living where the business is you are the business, so they were going to take that off my plate. And at the time, that was all I wanted.
So how many years did you run that business?
So we're talking, about 8.
Okay. So there's a book I read a while back from a big business broker. And he said that if he were a business owner, and he's seen it a million times, I think he's done like 300 transactions. He said, year 7, it's your duty as a business owner to sell or at least buy into a bigger business. He said that people don't lose their business, they lose their passion for the business and burn out.
100%.
And so if you don't sell in that 7 to 8 year, the businesses start going to erode and you're not going to get the value in the business that you want.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, one, in trying to chase growth and trying to be something within that New York ad, holding company thing without, the market now for selling small, medium companies is much different than it was, even 10 years ago. So there was a pretty specific route to selling. So I thought I had to match that process. Nowadays, you have the build to sell, the grow, buy then grow, you have all the different, there's a gazillion people who can help you, model and kind of approach. But looking at it, it's like you chase sale. Like I know is the biggest thing. And this is what I do now with a lot of the people I work with is set the foundation, because each level you grow, your foundational needs change. The type of thing, the type of people, the way you look at it, and maybe the same people, but how you look at the business. And it's not, and it's crazy because it should be incremental, but it's more like lockstep. You're kind of going along and you're like, hey, we're fine here. Yeah, it's getting a little warm, but we're fine. And then all of a sudden, just one little thing changes and it's like, oh, we have to look at everything differently. So it's like, okay, how are you adapting? I had a great operational structure for a $2.5 million business. I was flying. I had a great business at 2.5. It was wonderful. We were having fun. It was nice, but I grew it to 8 million on a 2.5 million infrastructure. And I was wondering why I was, wanted to kill everyone. I was drinking and, I weighed 400 pounds, not 400, but I weighed way too much. That approach, you have to constantly adapt and build your structure. You set the foundation right, and it's slower. It pushes back, I think, on a lot of it. But that gets back to what are you trying to do? And you talk a lot about this. Sure. It's like, well, if you identify what you're trying to do and what you want, it in a sense, the strength is not because it tells you what you should do. It tells you more of what you shouldn't do.
100%. And I think that I think I think that 90% of the time, I think people don't respect seasons, and I think that they live in absolutes. And I think that
grow.
it, look, I would say one of the smartest things and the hardest, just so we're clear, one of the smartest and the hardest things I ever did was I walked in 4 months ago to my CEO. I was CEO at the time. Pardon me, my COO.
Yeah.
I was CEO. He was COO with the plan of at the end of the year, he was going to become CEO.
Yeah.
And I looked at him dead in the face and I said, I can't be the CEO anymore. Can't do it. I don't want to. I don't want to come in the office. It's not my strength. I had to bring my RV down to Texas. And so for like 12 hours, I was on the phone networking, looking at businesses to buy. I was talking to friends, and I never felt so alive. I was on the road. I was talking. I was doing what I was born to do. And he goes, well, how quick do you want to make this change? I said, in the hour. And so we brought the team in. We told them, everybody, oh my God, is Austin leaving? No, I'm not leaving. I'm just the president now. I'm in a different role. Okay.
Yep.
And I would say for 3 months, I felt lost. I hated it because when I give something my everything, I give it all, every bit of me. Yeah. And so then I had Reg Zell on the podcast, and he said to me one thing. He said, you have to understand something. In the role that you're in, he said, you'll make about 4 to 5 decisions a year that will matter for the direction of the company. He goes, that's what you do now. He goes, those micro decisions, that's not in your personality. It's not your thing. And it changed my life.
Reg is a great example because I've learned a lot in hindsight from him and his business partner, and I'm forgetting his name. Josh, the operator. Josh did, and I want to say this is about 1.5 years ago, a beautiful tweet storm, whatever they're called nowadays, X-Storm, X-Men, of the balance between the operator and strategist, whatever.
Their understanding to stay in their lane, the discipline blows my mind.
But what I think was so interesting, the requirements, and because we all sit there and we talk about that, finding an operator, but whatever you call the other, the person does the thing, and that's the wrong thing, the thinking person.
Integrator.
But still, integrator, sorry. The integrator, and then the requirements that he has for Reg, while less day-to-day and less tactical, he holds Reg to a very high level of what Reg has to contribute and drive. And that's what I thought was so interesting. And, I'll dig it up because I actually took it and sent it to a business partner I was talking to at the time. I'm like, hey, this is how I want to structure it. They kind of looked at it and were like, that's a lot of work. Bye. That's a lot of work. But I'll send it off to you if I can dig it up. But it's so cool. So when I sold, I was very much in it because I was in a burnt position. I had previous up to sort of that, losing my whale and then trying to recover and restructure. I had prided myself that I was at Atlas. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", big. So I had one of my early on, one of my team had gotten me one of those Superman holding sort of the planet. So sort of so I was like, yes, that's me. But I had burnt all my reserves. And in hindsight, when I sold, if I had reserves and had gone through, things would have been better. Like you said, you change the business, restructure it, go to the next level. I was so focused that I sold. I was just so bitter. I got lucky as hell. One, I sold. I made, mid 7 figures. taxes and a lot of other stupidity took away a lot of it, but still, still did incredibly well. Lucky as MF. Um, but my whole identity was lost. And it really took a lot for me to kind of go, okay, I'm not the guy. Yeah, I'm not the agency. I'm not the business. Good thing is I had kids growing up. So, my poor kids probably had me going, so do you want to do something? Hey, do you want to go play some game? Hey, which was fun, but I feel bad for them, a little bit, though we did do a lot of skiing. So that was nice. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like finding that balance, finding that incremental directional piece, finding who you are, putting the effort, that painful effort of like the why,
Sure.
and just doing a little towards it. Like, I think, like, I used to, when I had my agency, we would bring in every couple of years, I would hire someone who would be, here's your mission statement, here's your, all that stuff. And it would be like, and I would kind of memorize it and say it to a bunch of times, mostly to clients, because, that's what you do with them. But they were useless. Afterwards, in interviewing lots of entrepreneurs like yourself and others, it's like, oh, not all, but a lot of the really interesting ones to me are ones that have labored consistently towards that why. Really like using that as their growth.
There's a guy I had on. So we're now at like 700 plus episodes. There's a guy I had on. I've done like, I think I've done like 1,000 episodes in like 4 years between multiple podcasts. Maybe longer, maybe more, right? And I had a guy, ex-Special Forces. He's a military investor, family man. He told me a why on the pod. Boys and girls, this is 5 years ago. It is melted in my skull. Like, all right, let's hear melted in my skull. So he goes through this whole story about how he was over in war. And I apologize because this is about to go. What war is. His job was to bury the people when they got killed. That was his job. Oof. And he said, I still think about that. And I said, well, what? And I make him, every time he comes on the podcast, I make him say it again. I'm not going to get it verbatim. So please, guys, but you can go back and look. Eric Upchurch. He said, my role is to live my life to the absolute fullest, to impact as many people as I can, because the people I buried didn't get the chance. Yep. And when he said it to me, I almost turned off the podcast because I thought to myself, I was like getting chills because I thought there's nobody that can stop that guy. Like, he's ending vet homelessness, like by building them houses. He walks like through mountains. Like, this dude has a why that is so above any business. Like, it doesn't matter what he does. And I think what's interesting, right, is I think that one of the things that I learned is that your goals can only be a representation of how your past views yourself. Right?
Ooh,
and so if that's the case, then if I live in the moment of my values and my why is bigger than everything around me, then we don't know what's possible. And so my why can't be the revenue of the business. It doesn't exist. It'll go up and down. I'll be exhausted. My why is one thing and one thing only: jobs. Okay? Jobs. We create jobs. But what you have to understand is those jobs put food on the table for the families, then get spent out in the community. So the ripple effect is that great. So that allows me to show up on days I don't want to because it's not about me.
Very much so. I love that example. I'm a military brat, and I got I still kick myself sometimes. I was recruited by West Point, all this. My dad was sort of like, he had been an officer in the Marines, and he was like, I never really told you about the times I was under fire. And I was like, well, yeah, you said you. It's like, well, no, I literally had times where I had people shot next to me. Yeah, and he was like, we're going to have this talk now. And I was like, okay, now that I've spent 10 plus years going, it was like, there's kind of this other side to this part of, so that is really powerful that he does that. I mean, see, this is, I think, what is fun when you start finding your why. Like, not even close to that, but like for me, I love helping, like you said,
Yep.
creating jobs. I like helping businesses get better so they can hire more people. Like
Yes.
we do that now a lot with my company, Inside Labs, where we really focus on sort of like, what is the foundation you have? Are you doing things the right way? Really looking at, are you setting up your leads right? Because there's so much noise out there about how you should go about growing your business. We were just,
Yep.
just like, oh, you don't know, you do this, you hear this, you even listen to this podcast. Not saying our approach, my approach. So Austin's pretty cool. So you guys can listen to Austin, but don't listen to me unless it fits really what you're talking about. But like, you have to build it for yourself. But in doing so, there's no magic secret sauce. It's just a lot of basic foundation of working towards what you want to achieve. You do the right foundation, you do the right stuff, or that lovely thing. How do you become a master? You chop wood, carry water. What do you do once you become a master? You chop wood, you carry water.
Yeah.
You
It's
just do the
all
things you need to do.
it's all based on simple practices, but the
Mhm.
mind makes complexity because we want to give ourselves an out.
Like toy. Well, that or like I know for me, and this was something I had to do, well, I didn't have to do it because I sold, but like when things were going well, I like puzzles. Yeah, I'm one of
Yeah.
those kids who like, oh, the Rubik's Cube.
I
Oh,
know
yeah,
where
boom,
you're
boom, boom,
going
boom.
with this.
Computers. So
Yeah.
it's like bright, shiny object syndrome. I made things more complex, but to a large degree, business is best when it's simple and consistent. It's like if you really get into food, like I love watching The Bear because almost every life lesson in the world is pretty much encapsulated by the writers of The Bear in the series. But it's like amazing food. The food that you think is not this like joyous home creation. It is a systematic, creation thereof is
Yep.
one thing, but then for the for the development for the restaurant, it has to be so structured and so precise to be replicable consistently that there is almost, it's no joy of discovery in the restaurant once it's created. It's the process of
Representation.
So
What people don't understand, because I was in the food and hospitality hotel business for 20 years. What people don't understand is all the foods of the world, meaning the national food of Spain, the national
yeah,
food of France, the national food of all these things. It's peasant food.
yeah,
It's peasant food. And what people don't really realize that is the most wild thing about the food business is that the fact that you can, and I mean this wholeheartedly, and I'll use it just because it's an easy example. The fact that you can get the same coffee at Starbucks here and the same Starbucks over there, and the fact that you can get the same sandwich there and there's 30 restaurants is mind blowing. That's a different person, different moods, different upbringing.
yeah.
They have built a process where the more boring, the better they're successful.
No, I think it's I mean, I remember traveling, back when there was like, all right, my favorite was I studied in Budapest in 1990, like just literally months after the wall came down in Berlin, the Iron Curtain came down, just shortly before the wall in Hungary. The signs were still all socialists, whatever. They hadn't even renamed it as Republic at that time. And a McDonald's came in while we were studying there. There was people online for 2 days, literally for 2 days. And it was just sort of like, and they were just like, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God, that's the worst. What are you talking about? What is this? And all my Hungarian friends were like, no, I got a ticket. I'm going to get in 22 hours. It's like, but it makes us part of something, I think, is
Yes.
where it comes to.
That was perfect. All right. So before we get out, I want to ask you a couple
Yeah.
questions. You sold your business. Did everything in your life change Did the birds sing and all the butterflies and everything was perfect after you sold it, right?
No, because I sold because I was this close to just lighting a fuse and walking out. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had actually started talking to people about just buying the office equipment and like, okay, that's going to give me a couple of months and I'm gone because I was burnt. Um, I got lucky, like I said, I kept things, kept relationships with it. So it wasn't even one of the private equity shops that I had talked to. It was one of my ex-employees plus some financial backers, from that had worked at a private equity I had talked to that was like, oh yeah, hey, why don't we, you have this one good business unit. Why don't we take that? And then like I sold another, so it was like a little piecemeal, a little whatever, but it was like done. But I was bitter. I felt like I had
Yeah.
been forced to it, even though
Yeah.
eventually I realized I had forced myself. Like the
Mm-hmm.
deal I got was a deal. Like you've talked a lot of times about leverage on
Mm-hmm.
your podcast, this podcast. Um, I had no leverage
Yeah.
other than the fact that it could blow it all up and there would be some lost opportunity. I got lucky in that
And
mindset.
I
Like,
think most people when they don't have leverage, they
yeah.
leverage their ego,
Oh,
and that's gonna
yep.
send them to the poorhouse. And I think that my advice to everybody, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, is I would sell about 2 years before you're ready. Like,
Yep.
meaning when you're fresh, when you're feeling good, the staff's engaged. Like, I think a lot of people wait too long, and then there's like I firmly believe this. I've looked at a lot of businesses. You have too.
Yeah.
Most aren't buyable.
Or they have so much, like, the whole reason I've now really started focusing on SMBs that have local marketing needs,
Mm-hmm.
home services businesses specifically, was I was looking at a business that was stuck in technology from 15 years ago, providing capabilities with great service, great people, but like they hadn't really adapted, especially with this sort of wave of, AI, but just automations and global talent that's all happening right now. It's sort of like we're seeing a wave that's hitting how you can go about getting
Yep.
results, and they hadn't adapted at all. And the more I was in talks, besides worrying about if this guy was telling the truth about certain things, the more I was realizing it's not like 3 months, 6 months. It was just like, oh, the adaption and the change of this business is going to take up years of my time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And if he had just, because like their finances were in a non-readable format because it was an Oracle 2003 financial and a server in the closet they were running off of, and Oracle didn't even support it anymore. If they had just started a few months before they went to sell, they would have just changed over to Quicken and spent the $40,000 it would take to clean it up and move it over, and they would have been in a great position. But yes, so here, instead of rambling, going back, yeah, I know from my experience, 2 years earlier would have been brilliant. But even more important was if I had 2 years before that started running my business as if I was going
Mm-hmm.
to sell, even if I wasn't going to. That's an interesting thing that I've seen.
Yep.
Similar to the, operating or running a business towards a why is running a business towards a sale, because that's almost the operational why. It's
Yep.
like we're going to do things in a way that is easily understood, easily structured, easily repeatable, non-response. Yeah. There would be no need for Magic Mike to. I don't know why I said Magic Mike, but a magic person to
Yep.
jump into the thing and
Mm-hmm.
do a magic trick of like, hey, here's the business. It's like literally the business just runs.
Yep.
So that takes, I think, 2 years
Yep.
selling. Yeah. So it's like, if you
It's
really want to run a good business, just run to have a strong why and build a business as if you were going to sell, even if you don't.
even if you don't. And I think that at the end of the day, I think you're gonna thank yourself for it because you're gonna create a business. There's a book, and I've read it 8 times. All right.
Yeah.
And it's called Self-Managing Business by Dan Sullivan. And so Dan
Oh,
Sullivan's a 40,
and then
he's my guy. It even has
his
pictures in it,
candidate
right?
program. Yeah.
It's 100 pages, it's got pictures. It's free or 99 cents, all right?
Yeah.
If you just do what's in that book, your entire life will change. But people won't. And he's basically saying build a self-managing business even though you don't want a self-managing business. These are the steps to do it. We basically
Yep.
built the foundation of the company off of this. It's like this big portfolio that we're building is off of this 99-cent book.
Have you done Strategic Coach?
I have not. I had a run of many years of masterminds and coaches. I have taken off. I made a decision 2 years ago that I don't want anybody informing my decisions for me. I want to live through them myself. And so I've been doing a self-analysis. I've been working on more personal stuff. I'm working with some different type of coaches. I found some stuff. It's really odd, and we don't need to get into the whole kit and caboodle, but I basically blocked out my childhood. I don't remember anything.
Oh, wow.
So I'm working through kind of unearthing some stuff in that realm. And I find, one of my favorite quotes from Hormozy is your business works more on you than you do on it. And it's the truth. I mean, you've never lived until you've managed 47 people. Like they literally, they have a BS detector, 5 states away. And so you find a lot about your behavior and stuff. And so there will be a time where I get back into the coaching thing. But for me right now, I'm just kind of like reflecting, taking time. I think that a lot of business owners, and this is what I truly think, and this is like my ultimate thing. And I've seen it firsthand. I saw it in this transaction. And you said it early. They don't know who they are separate from the business.
Yep.
And so let me explain something to you, people, you aggressive people that are trying to buy small businesses. You need to respect that the seller's probably spent 50 years in this business. He doesn't have anything else. And so you need to handle his emotions with understanding that from his point of view and act accordingly, because he's going to do things that you're not going to understand, but that's literally him fighting, not understanding what his next move is. They can tell you that they're going to retire and they're going to RV and they're going to do all that stuff. That lasts about a month. And then they're like, what the hell? And so understand that's where they're coming from. It's not to shit on you. It's that they literally don't know what to do.
Yeah. And I think, it helps definitely in talking when you're looking to acquire to recognize, price and the most money they can get out of the deal, the faster, the less kind of conditions and all that is important. But what you're going to do with the business that they ran, like I was having one conversation with a landscaping company, and I decided that really, even though it was a very large and very corporate, it just wasn't quite what I wanted to do my day to day. But it was so funny. The sticking point was literally just this: hey, we have Joe. Joe's been here forever. He really is just the person who knows everything about the culture, but he doesn't do anything else really. But I want to make sure Joe is sort of, and I was sort of like, and I was gonna do it, but it was sort of like, wow, that like this guy was, going to sell and was willing to kind of about $500,000 less if he knew Joe would be making his $60K a year. And it was just like, wow. I mean, the things you don't think are going to be important are so much important when you get into, trying to look at it.
There was a deal in Dallas. I'm dead serious. I would have bought it. So quick you don't even understand. Like I would have bought, it was money, location was killer, growing area. I've got tons of friends there. I wanted it. We put offers in left and right. And that damn broker blocked us every time. I don't know if he was saving it for a friend or I don't even know if it sold, right? The seller favorite thing to do in the entire world was go fishing. He had not been fishing in 5 years. I would have bought him a boat. I'm dead serious. I would have, and people are like, "You're going to spend 50 grand on a," yes, I'm going to spend 50 grand on a boat because that business can be scaled from 3 million to 10 million like that in that location. And I think people get caught up in the minutia details and understanding that you're going to make all that you want, but you have to get the asset first.
Well, you and I are different than I mean,
Yeah.
you're a little more directionally closer to the typical acquisition entrepreneur coming out of, the finance bro world a lot more than I am, since I came out of sort of, the marketing agency world, but it's still like, it's rare that people who've run businesses are trying to acquire business and understand that.
Yeah. Totally.
It's sort of like, a lot of it is that, like, you get into search fund, you get into the acquisition space, and it's getting more crunchy and a little bit, broader. But for a while, it was very stratified, and you would see almost all language above, let's just say, 5 million of acquisition was very, very typical baby private equity language. It's this, these are the financials you're looking for. You negotiate on these points. These are the things you do. When, as you said, it's, at the end of the day, it's a human being on the other side. And you then have to come in, not just convince them that you're going to be a human being into the business, but have these people who are so used to that human being now looking at you like, what? But this is okay. But this is also the reason why small businesses are such the community better. Everyone thinks of big business as sort of what business is, large companies, all that. They really only hire, it's like a third of the workforce is kind of in there. Most people are working for businesses with 20 or less. Actually, most people are working for businesses 10 or less people. And it is this whole idea of like, your world is, a big company, you would never even think about your boss changing. Just, okay, he got promoted, he got fired. Okay, I have, new day, new grind. I was going to say something cruder, but it's like, that was just what it is. But in a small business, the deal, the change of culture is such an impact and such an important thing to recognize and deal with. It's like, look, this is the bedrock of our country, not, not Apple. I mean, I love Apple and I have every Apple product on the planet, but, except for the Vision Pro, I was like, no. But, it really is your landscaping company, your pool, the guy who does your electrician. This is what our country is. And the culture that they create is a little more ad hoc, yes, and a little, but it is deeper than I think all these culture consultants and, know your whys and all that. It's like, it's more real.
1,000%. So people want to find you. How would they do that?
Well, okay. If you want to hear me talk with cool people like Austin, since he came on my podcast, I have the beyond8figures.com podcast where we interview entrepreneurs about their life journey and how they look at being an entrepreneur separate from being a business owner. That's one cool way, because I have cool people on all the way. Otherwise, Twitter at AJ Lawrence, all one word. You can hear me kind of rant, usually talk about cocktails or, other cool people out there. And then if you're interested in how to go about looking at your marketing from just what do I need to get done to even begin to start growing in the long term, that's insightlabs.ai.
I love it. Guys, go check out his things. I hope you got some value from this, and we'll see you soon.